I stared at the computer screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The house was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the dishwasher in the kitchen. I should have been working on my freelance project, but instead I found myself scrolling through yet another article by Patricia Brooke, the renowned marriage therapist. Communication is key, her words practically leaped off the screen. When your partner's behavior changes, it's crucial to address it head-on. I snorted, closing the tab. If only it were that simple. The front door creaked open, and I quickly minimized my browser. David's footsteps echoed through the hallway, heavier than usual. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever version of my husband would walk through that door. Naomi? His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth I'd grown accustomed to over our 12 years of marriage. In here, I called out, forcing a smile as he appeared in the doorway of our home office. David's tie hung loosely around his neck, his shirt wrinkled and untucked. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, a testament to the late nights he'd been keeping lately. He barely met my gaze as he leaned against the doorframe. "How was your day?" I asked, desperately trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. He shrugged, his eyes darting around the room. "Fine. Busy, you know how it is." I didn't know, actually. That was the problem. David had become a stranger to me over the past few months, and I was at a loss for how to bridge the growing chasm between us. "I was thinking we could go out for dinner tonight," I suggested, hoping to spark some interest. "That new Italian place downtown just opened up." David's jaw tightened. "I'm not really in the mood, Naomi. Maybe another time." I felt my smile falter. "Oh, okay. Well, I could whip up something quick here if you're hungry." "I already ate," he mumbled, turning to leave. "I'm going to take a shower." As he disappeared down the hallway, I slumped back in my chair, the weight of our failing marriage pressing down on me. What had happened to us? Where was the man who used to surprise me with flowers and impromptu dance parties in our living room? I reopened my browser, Patricia Brooke's smiling face greeting me once again. Her perfectly coiffed, silver hair and designer glasses exuded an air of wisdom and success. I found myself resenting her, even as I devoured every word she wrote. "When trust erodes, it's like a cancer in the relationship," one passage read. "Look for the root cause, not just the symptoms." The root cause. I'd been searching for months, analyzing every interaction, every potential misstep. Was it the stress of David's job? Had I become too focused on my own career? Or was there something more sinister at play? My phone buzzed, startling me out of my spiraling thoughts. It was a text from my Aunt Laura. "How are things, sweetheart? Still coming for lunch tomorrow?" I smiled, grateful for the distraction. Aunt Laura had always been my rock, especially since my parents passed away. If anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was her. As I typed out a reply, my eyes drifted back to Patricia Brooke's website. Something caught my attention, a small detail I'd overlooked before. In her bio, it mentioned she'd grown up in the same small town where David was born. Curiosity piqued, I began to dig deeper. It was probably nothing, just a coincidence. But as I scrolled through old newspaper archives and pieced together fragments of information, a pit formed in my stomach. The dates aligned perfectly. The names matched. And there, buried in a decades-old high school yearbook, was a photo that made my blood run cold. A young Patricia Brooke, her arm draped around a boy who looked eerily like my husband. My hands shook as I zoomed in on the caption, "Patricia and her cousin, James." But I knew that face. It wasn't David's cousin. It was his father. I paced our small living room, my mind reeling from the discovery I'd made. The weight of this secret pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. How could I tell David that the woman he'd grown up believing was just a distant relative was actually his mother? The sound of the shower stopped, and I froze. David's footsteps padded down the hallway, and I scrambled to compose myself. "Hey," he said, emerging in sweatpants and an old t-shirt. "I'm heading to bed early. Got a big meeting tomorrow." I nodded, my throat tight. "David, wait. Can we talk for a minute?" He hesitated, his hand on the bedroom doorknob. "Can it wait? I'm pretty beat." "It's important," I insisted, gesturing to the couch. With a sigh, he sat down and I perched on the edge of the coffee table across from him. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I know things have been difficult lately," I began, "with you losing your job and—" "I told you I'm working on it," David cut in, his voice sharp. I've got some leads. I held up my hands. I know, that's not what this is about. I found something out today, and I'm not sure how to tell you. David's brow furrowed. What are you talking about, Naomi? Just as I opened my mouth to speak, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his eyes widening. I have to take this, he said, standing abruptly. David, please. But he was already walking away, speaking in hushed tones into the phone. I caught snippets of the conversation. Yes, I understand. No, she doesn't know. I'll figure it out. My heart raced. What was he hiding? When he returned, his face was pale. That was the bank. We're in trouble, Naomi. I've been trying to handle it, but... What do you mean? In trouble? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. David ran a hand through his hair. I've been borrowing money, a lot of money, to keep us afloat after I lost my job, and now they want it back. The room spun. How much? More than we have, he whispered. We might lose the house. I sat there, stunned. The secret I'd uncovered about Patricia suddenly seemed insignificant in the face of this new crisis. How could we have fallen so far, so fast? Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice barely audible. David's shoulders slumped. I thought I could fix it. I didn't want you to worry. A bitter laugh escaped me. Well, that worked out great, didn't it? We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our financial ruin settling over us like a heavy blanket. Then a thought occurred to me. What about your aunt? I suggested, my mind racing. Patricia Brooke, she's loaded, isn't she? Maybe she could help. David's head snapped up. What? No, we can't ask her for money. We barely know her. If only he knew the truth. I bit my lip, wrestling with whether to reveal what I'd discovered. But looking at David's defeated expression, I couldn't bring myself to add to his burden. I just thought, she's family, right? I pressed, and she's always talking about the importance of supporting loved ones in her books. David shook his head. It's not that simple, Naomi. There's history there, things I don't like to talk about. My heart raced. Did he know more than he was letting on? What kind of history? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He stood up abruptly. It doesn't matter. We'll figure this out on our own. We always do. As he retreated to the bedroom, I sat there, my mind whirling. The contrast between our struggling existence and Patricia's opulent lifestyle seemed more stark than ever. She owed David, owed us, didn't she? I pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over Patricia Brooke's contact information. It would be so easy to call her, to demand she take responsibility for the son she'd abandoned. But as I stared at the number, a new plan began to form in my mind. If Patricia wouldn't help willingly, maybe it was time to force her hand. After all, how much was her precious reputation worth? I smiled grimly, a sense of purpose filling me for the first time in months. One way or another, Patricia Brooke was going to pay for what she'd done. The bell above Aunt Laura's door chimed as I stepped into her cozy cafe. The smell of fresh-baked muffins and coffee enveloped me, a comforting contrast to the turmoil in my mind. Naomi, sweetheart? Aunt Laura called from behind the counter. I've got a fresh pot brewing. Come on back. I followed her into the small office, sinking into the worn leather chair across from her desk. Laura studied my face, her brow furrowing with concern. All right, spill it, she said, sliding a steaming mug towards me. What's got you looking like you've seen a ghost? I took a deep breath and launched into the story. The discovery about Patricia, David's strange behavior, and our looming financial crisis. Laura listened intently, her eyes widening as I revealed each new piece of information. My God, she whispered when I finished. That woman has some nerve, prancing around giving marriage advice when she abandoned her own child. I nodded, gripping my mug tightly. I don't know what to do, Aunt Laura. David's falling apart, and I'm terrified we're going to lose everything. And all the while, Patricia's living it up in her mansion, probably laughing at us. Laura's eyes narrowed. Oh, I don't think so. Not on my watch. She leaned forward, a determined glint in her eye. We're going to pay Miss High and Mighty a little visit. What? No, we can't just... We absolutely can, Laura interrupted. That woman owes David, and you, big time. It's high time she faced the music. Before I could protest further, Laura was grabbing her purse and ushering me out the door. We climbed into her beat-up Volvo, and I gave her Patricia's address with a mix of trepidation and excitement. As we drove through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, my anger grew. How dare Patricia live like this while her son struggled? The contrast between her world and ours was stark, a physical representation of the injustice of it all. We pulled up to a sprawling estate, complete with manicured lawns and a fountain in the circular driveway. Laura let out a low whistle. Well, well, looks like abandoning your child pays pretty well these days. We marched up to the ornate front door, and I hesitated for just a moment before ringing the bell. The sound echoed through the house, and I held my breath. The door swung open, revealing Patricia Brooke herself. She was even more polished in person, perfectly coiffed silver hair, designer outfit, not a wrinkle in sight. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cool and professional. I straightened my spine. "Hello, Patricia. I'm Naomi, David's wife." The color drained from her face. I'm not sure I understand. How did you—" "Oh, I think you understand perfectly," Laura cut in, pushing past Patricia into the foyer. "We're here to talk about the son you abandoned." Patricia's composure cracked. She glanced around nervously before ushering us into a lavish sitting room. "Please, keep your voices down," she hissed. "My housekeeper." "Your housekeeper is the least of your worries right now," I snapped. "Do you have any idea what David's going through? What we're going through?" Patricia sank into an armchair, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "I never meant. I was so young when I had him. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving him up for adoption." "And what about now?" Laura demanded. "You're sitting pretty while your son is about to lose everything." Patricia's head snapped up. "What do you mean, lose everything?" I hesitated, realizing I'd revealed more than I intended. But as I looked around at the opulent room, at the life Patricia had built on the back of her abandoned child, my resolve hardened. "David lost his job," I said, my voice steady. "We're in serious financial trouble. We might lose our home." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "I had no idea. I want to help. Please, let me make this right." For a moment, hope flared in my chest. But then I remembered the years of silence, the secrets, the pain etched on David's face. "It's not that simple," I said, standing up. "You can't just throw money at this and make it go away. David deserves to know the truth." Patricia's face hardened. "No, absolutely not. It would destroy him and my career. I'll help financially, but David can never know about this." As I stared at her, my anger boiling over, I realized this was far from over. Patricia might think she held all the cards, but I was just getting started. "We'll see about that," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "This isn't over, Patricia, not by a long shot." I stormed out of Patricia's mansion, Aunt Laura hot on my heels. The cool evening air did little to quell the fire raging inside me. How dare she try to buy our silence? As if money could erase years of abandonment and lies. "Naomi, wait," Laura called, catching up to me at her car. "We need to think this through." I whirled around, my hands shaking. "Think what through? That woman abandoned David, and now she wants to throw cash at us like we're some charity case? It's insulting." Laura gripped my shoulders, her eyes serious. "I know, sweetheart, but we need to be smart about this. David's still in the dark, and your financial situation—" The mention of our money troubles doused my anger with a wave of cold reality. I slumped against the car, suddenly exhausted. "What am I supposed to do, Aunt Laura?" I whispered. "We're drowning in debt, and the one person who could help us is the last person I want anything from." Laura's expression softened. "Let's get you home. We'll figure this out together." The drive back was silent, my mind racing with possibilities and consequences. By the time we pulled up to my house, I'd made a decision. "I have to tell David," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "He deserves to know the truth." Laura nodded, squeezing my hand. "You're right, but be careful, Naomi. This could change everything." I found David in our home office, hunched over a stack of bills. The sight of him, looking so defeated, made my heart ache. "Hey," I said softly, hovering in the doorway. "Can we talk?" He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. "If it's about money, I'm working on it. I promise." I shook my head, moving to perch on the edge of his desk. "It's not about that. Well, not entirely. David, there's something I need to tell you about Patricia Brooke." His brow furrowed. "What about her?" Taking a deep breath, I launched into the story, the research, the discovery, the confrontation. With each word, David's face grew paler, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests of his chair. When I finished, the silence was deafening. David stared at me, his expression unreadable. "Say something," I pleaded. "Anything." He stood abruptly, pacing the small room. This can't be true. Patricia? My mother? It doesn't make sense. I know it's a shock, but... A shock. David laughed bitterly. That's putting it mildly, and you went to see her, without telling me? I flinched at the accusation in his voice. I was trying to protect you, to get answers. Answers? He spun to face me, his eyes blazing. You had no right, Naomi. This is my life, my family. I'm your family. I shot back, hurt and anger bubbling up. I was just trying to help us. David's phone buzzed, interrupting our argument. He glanced at it, his face draining of color. It's the bank, he muttered. They're foreclosing on the house. We have 30 days. The room spun. I gripped the desk for support, my mind reeling. What are we going to do? David slumped back into his chair, defeated. I don't know. We don't have any options left. As I watched my husband crumble before me, a cold determination settled in my chest. There was one option left. One I'd sworn I wouldn't take. Actually, I said, my voice steady, we do have an option. Patricia offered to help us financially. David's head snapped up. What? No, absolutely not. We are not taking money from that woman. David, be reasonable. We're about to lose everything. Our home, our future. Can we really afford to let pride stand in the way? He stared at me, conflict raging in his eyes. And what's the catch? There's always a catch. I hesitated, knowing my next words could change everything. She doesn't want you to know the truth about her being your mother. The silence that followed was deafening. David's face cycled through a range of emotions, anger, hurt, confusion. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. So that's it? We take her money and pretend none of this ever happened? I met his gaze, steeling myself for what came next. No, we take her money and then we make her face the consequences of her actions, once and for all. As the words left my mouth, I knew there was no going back. The war with Patricia had officially begun, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to win. The weeks following our confrontation with Patricia were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and subtle changes. David and I had reluctantly accepted her financial help, but the cost to our peace of mind was steep. Every time the phone rang or an unexpected envelope arrived in the mail, I felt my stomach clench with anxiety. One afternoon, as I sorted through the bills, I noticed something odd. Several of our outstanding debts had been mysteriously paid off. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but as I dug deeper, I realized the truth. Patricia was meddling in our lives, far beyond the agreed-upon assistance. David, I called out, my voice tight with anger. You need to see this. He appeared in the doorway, his expression wary. What is it now, Naomi? I thrust the papers at him. Your mother's been paying off our debts behind our backs. She's trying to buy her way into our lives. David's face darkened as he scanned the documents. I can't believe she'd go this far. Can't you? I shot back. She's been manipulating situations her entire life. Why stop now? Before David could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his eyebrows shooting up in surprise. It's my boss. He wants me to come in for a meeting tomorrow. Faust says there might be an opportunity for me to get my old job back. My heart sank. Let me guess, Patricia had something to do with this too? David's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I watched as he struggled with the conflicting emotions playing across his face, gratitude warring with resentment, hope battling pride. We can't keep living like this, I said softly. She's pushing us into the role of helpless victims in our own lives. Don't you see? She gets to play the savior while keeping her precious secret intact. David slumped onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. What choice do we have, Naomi? We were drowning. At least now we have a chance. I sat beside him, taking his hand in mine. But at what cost? Our self-respect? Our independence? There has to be another way. As we sat there, the weight of our situation pressing down on us, an idea began to form in my mind. It was risky, potentially disastrous, but it might be our only chance to regain control. What if, I said slowly, we turn the tables on Patricia, use her own tactics against her? David looked at me, confusion etched on his face. What do you mean? I stood up, pacing as the plan took shape. She's so desperate to keep her secret, right? To maintain her perfect image. What if we create a situation where she has no choice but to reveal the truth herself? Naomi, that's crazy. We can't... Just hear me out, I interrupted. Karsnap, we engineer a crisis, a big one. something that would force Patricia to choose between her secret and watching you suffer. She'd have to come clean or risk losing you forever. David's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. You're talking about manipulating my own mother, about lying and scheming. How does that make us any better than her? His words stung, but I pressed on. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Don't you want the truth to come out on our terms? Don't you want justice for all those years she abandoned you? I could see the conflict raging behind David's eyes. Part of him was horrified by the idea, but another part, the part that had been hurt and betrayed, was intrigued. I don't know, Naomi, he said finally. This is a dangerous game you're proposing. I knelt in front of him, taking his hands in mine. I know it is, but think about it. Really think. Do we want to spend the rest of our lives beholden to Patricia? Always wondering when the other shoe will drop? Or do we take control of our own destiny? David was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on our intertwined hands. When he looked up, there was a new resolve in his eyes. Okay, he said softly. Tell me more about this plan of yours. As I began to outline my strategy, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursed through me. We were about to embark on a dangerous path, one that could either save us or destroy everything we held dear. But as I looked at David, seeing the spark of determination in his eyes, I knew we had no choice. It was time to beat Patricia at her own game. My hands shook as I dialed Patricia's number, adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it, the moment our entire plan hinged on. One false move, and everything would crumble. Patricia Brooks speaking, her crisp voice answered. I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of desperation I could muster. Patricia, it's Naomi. We need your help. It's David. There was a pause on the other end. What's happened? Is he all right? No, I choked out, tears coming easily as I thought about the very real possibility of losing everything. He's in the hospital. There was an accident at work, and we can't afford the treatment he needs. Patricia's sharp intake of breath was audible. What do you mean? I thought I'd taken care of your financial troubles. I launched into the story we'd carefully crafted, a tale of mounting medical bills, experimental treatments, and a ticking clock. With each word, I could hear Patricia's resolve crumbling. I'll wire you the money immediately, she said, her voice tight with concern. It's not just about the money anymore, I pressed, my heart racing. David's asking questions about his past, about his family medical history. The doctors need information, and I don't know what to tell him. The silence that followed was deafening. I held my breath, praying our gambit would work. I'll be there in an hour, Patricia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. As I hung up, I caught David's eye across the room. He nodded grimly, and we set our plan in motion. An hour later, we sat in a private hospital room we'd managed to secure for our ruse. David lay in the bed, looking pale and drawn, the result of hours of careful makeup and preparation. When Patricia burst through the door, her usual composure was nowhere to be seen. Her eyes were wild, her silver hair disheveled. David, she breathed, rushing to his bedside. My God, I had no idea it was this bad. David's eyes flickered open, confusion etched on his face. Aunt Patricia, what are you doing here? Patricia hesitated, glancing at me. I steeled myself, knowing this was the moment of truth. David, I said softly, there's something you need to know. About Patricia, about your past. Naomi, don't, Patricia warned, her voice low and dangerous. But I pressed on, recounting the story of our discovery, watching as David's face cycled through shock, anger, and disbelief. Is this true? He demanded, turning to Patricia. Are you my mother? The room fell silent, the weight of decades of secrets hanging in the air. Patricia's shoulders slumped, defeat written across her face. Yes, she whispered. It's true. I'm so sorry, David. I never meant for you to find out like this. What happened next was a blur of raised voices and accusations. David miraculously recovered from his illness, confronted Patricia about years of abandonment and lies. Patricia, torn between defending herself and begging for forgiveness, crumbled under the weight of her own deceptions. As I watched them, a sick feeling grew in the pit of my stomach. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? Patricia exposed, David finally knowing the truth. So why did it feel so hollow? You, Patricia spat, turning on me with fury in her eyes. You orchestrated all of this. The accident, the medical emergency, it was all a lie, wasn't it? I lifted my chin, meeting her gaze. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. But as I said the words, I saw the hurt and betrayal in David's eyes, not just directed at Patricia, but at me as well. Both of you, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You've both been lying to me, manipulating me. I don't know who to trust anymore. As David stormed out of the room, leaving Patricia and me in stunned silence, I realized the true cost of our revenge. In our quest for justice, we'd shattered the very foundations of trust our family was built on. And as I stood there, caught between a shattered Patricia and the echoing absence of my husband, I wondered if this victory was worth the price we'd paid. The hospital corridor stretched before me, endless and cold. I ran, my footsteps echoing off the sterile walls, desperately searching for David. My elaborate plan, my thirst for justice, it all seemed so foolish now. "David," I called out, ignoring the disapproving glances from nurses and patients. "David, please!" I rounded a corner and froze. There he was, slumped in a chair in the hospital's small chapel, his head in his hands. The sight of him, so broken and vulnerable, made my heart ache. "David," I whispered, approaching slowly. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a pain I'd never seen before. "Didn't you, Naomi? Wasn't this exactly what you wanted?" His words stung, but I couldn't deny the truth in them. I sank into the chair beside him, the weight of my actions pressing down on me. "I thought I was doing the right thing," I said softly. "I thought you deserved to know the truth about Patricia." David laughed bitterly. "The truth? What truth? That my mother abandoned me? That my wife has been lying to me for months? That my entire life is built on secrets and manipulation?" Each word was like a knife to my heart. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "David, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" he snapped, standing abruptly. "How you and Patricia have been playing me like a puppet, how you both claim to love me, but you've done nothing but lie and scheme." I stood too, desperation clawing at my throat. "That's not fair. Patricia was the one who abandoned you, who kept this secret for decades. I was just trying to protect you." "Protect me?" David's voice rose, echoing off the chapel walls. "By creating an elaborate hoax? By making me think I was dying? Do you have any idea what that felt like?" Tears streamed down my face as the full impact of my actions hit me. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't stand seeing Patricia waltz into our lives, acting like she had any right to be there. After everything we've been through, after all the struggles we've faced." David's expression softened slightly, but the hurt in his eyes remained. "I understand why you did it, Naomi, but that doesn't make it right. You should have trusted me with the truth from the beginning." Before I could respond, the chapel door burst open. Patricia stood there, her usual poise shattered, mascara streaking down her face. "David, please," she begged. "Let me explain. There's so much you don't know." David's face hardened again. "I think I know enough. You gave me up, and then you tried to buy your way back into my life with your money and influence. What more is there to say?" Patricia stepped forward, her hands outstretched. "I was young and scared. I thought I was doing what was best for you. Please, just give me a chance to make things right." I watched as David looked between us, the two women who claimed to love him most in the world. The air crackled with tension, years of secrets and lies finally laid bare. "I can't do this," David said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't trust either of you right now. I need time to think." As he pushed past us and out of the chapel, I felt my world crumbling around me. I'd won, hadn't I? Patricia's secret was out, the truth finally revealed. But at what cost? I turned to face Patricia, expecting to see anger or accusation in her eyes. Instead, I saw a reflection of my own pain and regret. "What have we done?" she whispered. In that moment, standing in the silent chapel with my husband's long-lost mother, I realized the true magnitude of our actions. We'd both claimed to be acting out of love, but our selfish desires and need for control had torn apart the very person we were trying to protect. As the weight of our choices settled over us, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. Somehow, we had to find a way to rebuild the trust we'd shattered, if David would ever let us back into his life again. The days following the hospital confrontation blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and unanswered calls. David had disappeared, leaving Patricia and me to stew in the mess we'd created. It wasn't until a week later that I received a text. Meet me at the park, 2 p.m., both of you. My heart raced as I approached the bench where David sat, his face unreadable. Patricia arrived moments later, her usual polished appearance replaced by dark circles and disheveled hair. We stood there, 3 broken pieces of a family that never was, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "I've had time to think," David began, his voice steady but strained, "about what you both did and why." I opened my mouth to speak, but he held up a hand, silencing me. "Let me finish," he said. "Patricia, you abandoned me. You chose your career and your reputation over your own child. And Naomi, you lied to me. You manipulated me in the cruelest way possible, all in the name of what you thought was right." Patricia's shoulders slumped, tears streaming down her face. I felt my own eyes burning, the weight of my actions pressing down on me. "But," David continued, "I also understand that you both acted out of love, however misguided it was." He turned to Patricia. "You were young and scared. You thought you were giving me a better life, and in many ways, you did. My adoptive parents loved me, and I had a good childhood." Patricia nodded, unable to speak through her tears. David then faced me, his eyes softening slightly. "And Naomi, you were trying to protect me, to right a wrong you saw in the world. Your methods were terrible, but your intentions, I believe they were pure." I felt a glimmer of hope, but David wasn't finished. "The thing is," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "I don't know if I can ever fully trust either of you again. You've both shown that you're willing to lie and manipulate to get what you want, even if you believe it's for my benefit." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as David struggled with his next words, the pain evident on his face. "But," he said finally, "I'm willing to try. To rebuild, if you both are." Patricia stepped forward, her hand outstretched. "David, I know I can never make up for the years I lost with you. But if you'll let me, I want to be a part of your life now. No more secrets, no more lies." David hesitated for a moment before taking her hand. "It won't be easy," he warned. "We have a lot of lost time to make up for." Then he turned to me, and I felt my heart stop. "Naomi," he said softly, "can you promise me no more schemes, no more hidden agendas, just us?" I nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I promise, David. I'm so sorry for everything. I love you, and I want to make this right." He pulled me into a tight embrace, and for a moment I felt like I could breathe again. As we stood there in the park, the 3 of us linked by blood and choice, I realized that this wasn't an ending, but a beginning. We had a long road ahead of us, filled with therapy sessions, difficult conversations, and the slow rebuilding of trust. But as I looked at David, his face etched with both pain and hope, I knew it was a journey worth taking. The lines between revenge and justice, between right and wrong, had blurred beyond recognition. In the end, all we had left was the truth, messy, complicated, and painfully real. "So," David said, a hint of his old smile tugging at his lips, "where do we go from here?" I squeezed his hand, feeling Patricia's tentative touch on my shoulder. "Forward," I said, "together." As we walked out of the park, the afternoon sun warming our faces, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had weathered the storm of secrets and lies, and though we were battered and bruised, we had emerged on the other side, not unscathed but unbroken. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Our family, in all its messy, complicated glory, would face it together.